Well, I'm an electrical engineer by training, University of Louisville, many years ago. Then I worked for General Electric for a year in upstate New York. Then I went to graduate school in Pittsburgh at what's now Carnegie Mellon University and earned a master's and PhD in electrical engineering. Was recruited to work for the Central Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C. This was in 1964. And with a new group called the Office of Research and Development, whose job it was to go out into industry and bring into the agency new technologies. In those days, new technologies were transistors and computers, which were then still in the other building. So it was an amazing 5 years because I got to meet hundreds of entrepreneurs who didn't even know they were entrepreneurs, because technology entrepreneurs did not really exist, because computing power is essential in a technology business. And computers were still in the other building, but now small companies of maybe 20 people or so could have access to a mini computer, which may cost in those days 30 or 40,000, but they could arrange to get that and now do enough computing power to develop things. Of course, in bigger companies, they had the bigger computers, and our job was to find the individuals within the big companies that could actually do a project to develop something, or find a small company for which our amount of money could be useful to them. So I was all over the country and out of the country looking for these small companies, and really got an education in entrepreneurship. And I spent 5 years with the agency and then moved to a small stock brokerage firm there in Washington, D.C., whose owner and my partner was interested in small technology companies. He had actually been a trader for a mutual fund when he was in graduate school in the 1930s in New York. So I spent 20 years for them. Then I invested in a small newspaper called Washington Technology, which dealt with the tech business around Washington. And we spent 10 years and built that up and sold it to the Washington Post Company in '96. And since then, I've sort of been a bum. But I love working with small companies because entrepreneurship, you meet the people that are really on the road making things happen. When I first moved to Carlsbad, which has now been about 2.5 years ago, I wanted to be involved in the community. So I joined the Chamber of Commerce, and I went to their first Friday breakfast, which is the get-together with all the mostly entrepreneurs or people in the companies. And each table is chaired by a chamber member who's been through training on how to make things happen at the table, so you communicate with each other. And I was impressed with how Kelly handled the table. Of course, totally infatuated with her smile. And between those two things, I said, I want to meet her. But more important, I just moved to California, and it was time to redo our wills with California law. But you could see in Kelly the same thing I look for in entrepreneurs. And that is, first of all, they're excited about what they're doing. If they don't have excitement on what they're doing, you don't get off the ground, because this person or people have to dedicate themselves to their project or their company, virtually to the exclusion of everything else they're doing. And that is a tough balance between the entrepreneur and his or her family, because now you have to balance there, and they generally get started with no capital. And now comes the interesting stuff of how do you get a company off the ground with no capital. So the first thing a person like myself, who did a lot of venture deals over the years with entrepreneurs, singles, is you start by saying, so how much are you putting in? And this is a tough question for an entrepreneur that hasn't thought about it, because their general answer is, well, I'm putting my sweat equity in. And I said, you know, when you go for outside investors, that's not good enough. Because if you don't have any money, why should I give you my money if you haven't been able to put yourself in a position to put some money in there? Then on top of that, you say, well, where do we go to get some additional money, assuming we have a business plan that needs capital? So generally the answer is, well, you go to angel investors, or you go to Aunt Susie, who has money. And actually, those are the places you go. So how do you put together a group of investors, some of which will be family, because if your family doesn't love you, you got big problems. Then your friends. Well, most entrepreneurs say, well, I don't want to go to my friends. because I don't want them to lose money. And I said, that's the wrong attitude. You're in business to make money. So if you're going to make money, why would you exclude your friends? So now you go to your friends and say, you know, I've got this project and I'm going to be out there raising money. I'd like to invite you to join me. You don't have to, and we may lose, but I don't want to be successful and not have asked you. So after the family and the friends come the next people who will invest because you invested and your family invested and your friends invested. Therefore, they're willing to take the chance because if those people like you enough to put money in, I as a third party would be interested. So that combination is how you get companies off the ground in general. So with respect to getting them off the ground, you've now got a whole group of people to approach, and you need to have your house in order from day one. And this is what also has infatuated me about Kelly and her new book and her new program, because this allows you to see what you really need to make sure what we're doing legally is correct. Because if you can't get that simple stuff done, how in the world can you do the follow-ons and the follow-ons and the follow-ons? So talking about this group of investors, I have always taken the attitude that the initial investors in companies, not family, not friends, but outside investors, I'll call them third-party investors. Why do they go into a small deal where the odds already are against it, but secondly, where it may be a long time before you reap your rewards, even if it's successful? And the answer is these people have generally been successful. And they've been successful because either they were in entrepreneurial companies, or heaven forbid, they inherited a lot of money and they got to get rid of it, or they have just been in business and saved a lot and they want to participate with entrepreneurs off the ground floor. So they're not angels in the sense many people call these angel investors. I have never called them angel investors, but they're hobby investors. I'm a hobby investor. I love to be a part of something, and it's something I do that's not really an investment, it's an expenditure. So I put my money in and it's gone. If I get it back, I've been successful and I can go to the bank with my scorecard. So it's something that gives you real pleasure, but you go in on the assumption the odds are against me, this person's got to work, but I'm willing to participate and work with them and help them. So that's where small companies get their best advice and their best supporters, is from these third-party investors that have been successful and want to help out all they can. All of this stuff put together means that you've got a lot of pieces to work with now. And the thing that is the simplest is actually doing the legal work right, because that is fixed initially. You got to get with the local, you got to get incorporated right, you have to get your board of directors, you have to get bylaws, you have to get all these things that are pieces in place, and make sure your contracts are good and make sure your patents or whatever else you're doing are important. And this is where I've been impressed with Kelly and her plan for a small entrepreneurial company for a fixed price can get all the basic stuff done. That's hard to beat. And she's got a book that explains all of this stuff. So I've written a book 30 years ago, but it doesn't cover the legal aspects. It covers the procedures as you go forward. So with her book, you now get off the ground very easily. She also has a second program, which if you're in business and you're beginning to do okay, and now you see you're going to grow, there are whole new items of legal stuff that has to be done to set you up for that next phase. Write Kelly a check, get the job done.